No, forget the annotation. I'm just gonna go back to talking about what's wrong with these people. So, now you know how I really felt about the fandom at this time. I hated it. Like, I really hated it. I hated it so much for all of the discord that it was causing within itself, and because of all the problems and all the stress that it was causing for other people and myself. I just felt so distant from it after hearing about those death threats. I still remember it like it was yesterday when I actually snapped out loud. I was outside raking some leaves, and when I really thought about how serious all this bullshit was, I just started aimlessly yelling out in my yard. I just can't believe I fooled myself into thinking that bronies were special. I mean, you've heard those stories about this person who wants to be part of this really great community they've been hearing so much about, and then it turns out everyone in it is a self-entitled jerk, but man, this one really takes the cake. It's like when you're a 3-year-old waiting to open your Christmas presents and then all you get is a pair of socks. I wasn't just upset. I wasn't just angered. I was disappointed. I was disappointed in this fandom. After all of the nice things that I had been seeing it do, and all the great things that were coming out of it, I really thought that it could be better than that. But to see everyone fighting over the quality of the show, and sending hate mail towards the staff, and hate comments towards each other in whatever comment section or Skype chat, and they were so willing to do it too. They weren't forced into hating each other, they leapt at the chance. They couldn't wait to pick a side and turn on each other, because that is the law of the internet. At that point, they didn't even need any blind haters or anti-bronies giving them a bad name, because they were doing that to themselves. And I just hated the whole damn thing. I hated it so much. And yet, I still really loved the show. I wanted to keep watching it despite the horrible people that it was representing. So, what do you call a person when they really like to watch My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, but really don't like the fandom? I don't think you can call them a brony, and that's when it hit me. I'm already kind of detached from a lot of human nature because of all the bad stuff in it, so I felt the same way about the brony fandom too. So I decided to call myself MisAnthroPony. It's the name that I was going with when I was starting out my channel, and it's the name that I was going with when I put together that first video and was announcing that I was going to do some rant videos. Rants on people who were coming across to me as very problematic. It was something that I just thought needed to be done. After all that time I spent looking through all those comments, all those people giving the show a bad name for no good reason, and I didn't see anyone doing anything about it. Someone had to speak up for the show and against the people who were giving it a bad rep, and it looked like it had to be me. I knew it had to be me. Something just told me that it needed to be me. No, it didn't just need to be me. I knew I was the only one who could. And I knew that I was the only one who could when I was hearing about so many people who came across my plans and they were actually supportive of what I was planning to do. Like the only sane people who were left in this fandom, looking for someone to give them a voice when they were unable to make one themselves. Someone who could speak for them. Someone who could elaborate how they felt about the situation. They were looking to me, hoping that I would be able to properly set things straight. And boy was I ready to do so. I was putting a lot of thought into what I was going to do. I was doing a lot of planning for all of these future videos. Even when I would sometimes remind myself about how sad I was and how I would let the frustration get to me, I never allowed it to slow me down. I showed no shame in what I was planning in the future. I wasn't going to be like one of those people who eventually realized that what they were doing wasn't good and that they were going to change their mind about the whole thing. I was going to see it all the way through to the end, just going to let all of my punches out and not holding a single one back. Whatever problem I had with these people, I was gonna let it out, and I wasn't gonna sugarcoat anything. I actually thought that I was going to get a lot of dislikes because of the theme of the content, and I did it regardless because I knew that this was something that I wanted to do, and I didn't care what anyone else thought about it. And in the end, I was actually kind of surprised when there were a lot of people coming by my channel and they actually really liked what I had to say about these people that were being problematic. They praised me for speaking for them, for representing them, for giving them a voice in a time where the fandom was in a place of uncertainty. And I figured if people were going to support me and be along for the ride, why was there any reason to stop now? Even when I started getting comments from people who hated what I was doing, I never stopped feeling that way. And even when I was starting to get noticed by people in the Bronalysis community, no matter who it was, I wasn't going to let them hold me back. I wasn't going to let them drag me down. I was going to keep voicing how I felt about these people, and nothing they did was going to change my mind. I set out to do this knowing that people were going to hate me. But I wasn't going to let that slow me down. I wasn't going to care for what any of these people thought of me. I was going to keep on going, and I was going to keep on going until I got to everyone and let them know how I thought about things. Someone had to keep making these videos. Someone had to keep talking about the situation. And I knew because people kept on telling me that I had to keep going with what I was doing. Whether it was Cuddlepug, Biter, Mage, Digibro, Tommy Oliver, or Chad Rocco, I was going to keep making these videos, and nothing they did was going to make it stop. And every time I was about to make a video, as I was putting it together, I would keep in mind every single thing that was wrong with them. Quite possibly, the most tragic case in this situation was Digibro. I actually used to watch his content. I used to look up to what he was saying. And then I started hearing about how people were having problems with him. How he was being so stuck up and waving his ego in everyone's faces, thinking that he was too good for other people who were reviewing the same stuff that he was. I took a look at him for myself, seeing how much he changed for the worst. And I still cannot get over how much I hated the way he was acting. Just watching him strutting around, acting like a big shot, waving that cigarette in his camera, not being open-minded towards his audience. And he even thinks to intrude in an argument that he had nothing to do with just so he can kiss up for his dear friend's ass. Someone that he used as a cop-out by taking a cameo from on their channel because he was too lazy to make his own video on the Equestria games. Watching him jug down that bottle of alcohol, mindlessly spewing out a straw man argument without making any valid points. It was a complete disgrace. At that point, I could care less if he wasn't a good reviewer. What I really had a problem with was his attitude. How he thought he could talk about anyone and anything however he wanted without any form of backlash. And speaking of that friend who he was so willing to go out of his way to kiss up to, Tommy Oliver, not to be confused with the Power Ranger, was one of the most arrogant people who had anything to do with this show. Constantly contradicting himself, being hypocritical, not seeking a different understanding of what was going on, and then he has the nerve to be upset with people for pointing out flaws in his content. Not being open-minded with his audience and getting into fights with other analysts like everybody else was doing, adding fuels to certain fires, and making a video that really didn't make all that much sense to me. Has analysis damaged the fandom? The fandom was damaged long before people were reviewing the show, so that's kind of a moot point. And he has the nerve to talk down his audience, being condescending against them, accusing them of being ignorant, and dividing his audience even further by putting in this stupid click here to skip the bad button idea, which was doomed on arrival. If he really wasn't interested in talking about the show anymore, why couldn't he leave with a sense of dignity? Give and Take left with a sense of dignity. Theory Brony left with a sense of dignity. Why couldn't he? Because he got so caught up in his self-righteousness that he wasn't willing to listen to reason. He could have left like an adult, but instead he decided to act like a child. He chose to spit in the face of every single nice thing that this show ever did for him. The friends he's made, the popularity he was getting, the money he was making. The only reason that anyone on this planet even knows he exists. If it wasn't for that generic, horribly written show that he selfishly dropped, no one would have even looked at him. And after all that, he looked straight in the eye of everyone who ever subscribed to his channel because they actually cared for what he had to say and told them that they were the fucking problem. No, his audience is not the problem. He's just an idiot. No good is going to come from bashing your own audience. You have to get to the heart of why they're making those comments in the first place. You have to think of a very constructive way to respond to each and every single one of those people, unless they're being incredibly non-negotiable and very, very offensive. What were either of these two planning to accomplish by giving in to these incredibly inappropriate manners? Everyone kept saying that they were the best at reviewing the show, and that was a time when they were the only ones doing it. A time when Silverquill and Jesse Wood weren't around to step them up. It might not have been so bad if their reviews stayed informative and they had an attitude that felt negotiable with people who were watching their stuff. But after the way they left, it's clear to me that they never cared about their content. They only cared about the fame and the money that they could be getting on their Patreon for doing this. They placed themselves on a pedestal that they didn't even want. And when they felt like they didn't need it anymore, they walked off and gave their audience the back of their hand. And that's why they're such good friends, because they're exact copies of each other, and they just appreciate themselves so much. The only way you could possibly be more pretentious than that is if you were, Biter. Have you ever wondered why his girlfriend is the only one who really cares for anything that he has to say? You cannot have a conversation with this guy without him having some kind of upper hand over you. You cannot work with him. You cannot negotiate with him, because every single time you try to bring up a point, he comes back with an overbloated monologue. Pages of drawn-out paragraphs that try to say something, but don't really offer anything of actual value. I'm sure he's a smart person, maybe he's a lot smarter than a lot of us would give him credit for, but maybe that intelligence got to him so much that he has become so full of himself. You wanna know what is the best way to lose an argument against Biter? It's to even bring up a point. He will frustratingly turn any kind of discussion into a debate. And the thing about debates is that you can't win them. The people in the debate just keep going back and forth until one of them eventually gets tired of arguing with their opponent. And I think that's kind of how Biter ends up winning all the time. He waits for the other person to get tired of arguing with them so he can feel like he got the last laugh. And even if you do take time to think about what he's saying and try to come up with a counter-argument that felt like it was thoroughly thought out, he'll probably dismiss it as lazy, like he did with Voice of Reason. You end up feeling like an idiot just for trying to have a word with him. I'm sorry, what does Mage see in him again? Maybe she likes how he has the same ideology as her when it comes to storytelling. Because if something is not explicitly explained to them, then it's a plot hole or bad writing. She thinks she's above the fandom's lunacy because she's nice or because she left and no longer has anything to do with it. Well, she's not. Whether it's an anime or a Disney movie, her viewpoints are still gonna be carried over to something else. And then she can annoy an entirely different fan base or audience with what she has to say. It's not so much an opinion as it is a mentality. She'll keep coming up with alternatives to defend her criticisms from people who are pointing out flaws in her arguments, regardless of how close-minded they may seem. She'll continue to not really care for what another person has to say because she'll convince herself that this is objectively the way that something is. It doesn't matter how nice you are, if you continue to present yourself as that type of person, people will push you away and not want to have anything to do with you. My rants, now that I look back at them, were admittedly shit, because that's not the kind of stuff that I was focusing on. I was more focusing on how they were talking about ponies, but now that I've really thought about their attitudes and how they engage in discussions with other people, I feel like that's the kind of thing that people needed to understand. And that's not including KP, who's not very cooperative with her collab partners or her staff, FNGR, who uses clickbait material and titles for his videos, Lily Pete, who I don't even want to dignify, and Joshua Burner, who is a complete pushover. Really, dude? She treats you and Ink Rose like garbage, and you apologize to her? That is pathetic. And after all that, you've got those who want to cling to the moral high ground like Lightning Bliss or Toon Critic, Tyen Daga, Past Analysis, and even ANY for telling me that what I'm doing is a bad thing, regardless of how hypocritical they may seem when they're doing it. I mean, really look at how all of this started. This all started when people started fighting about their own viewpoints. You allowed those fights to escalate into flame wars that completely damage the way other people see you. And you have the gall to talk down to me like you never did any of the things that I did. I've seen your comments, I've seen your arguments, I've seen the ways that you people have been treating each other in later years. Who knows, maybe I started that whole ranting fiasco because I wanted to get in on the bandwagon. After all, everybody else was talking about how much they hate each other. Hey, I was just beginning to feel left out. Maybe I was being an asshole at the time, but at the very least I didn't have any friends when I started what I was doing. And in a way, that's what makes all of you no better than me. Because all of you, whether you're a casual viewer of the show or a member of the Brony Analysis community or an artist, someone who makes music, someone who is in those forums where you discuss things, or that angry YouTube commenter who's leaving behind that hurtful message as I speak. All of you did the worst thing that you could possibly do as a person who ever remotely watched My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. You showed me how little your friendships actually mattered to you. Do you know who Bunny Zachurl is? She is the woman behind the very creation of the My Little Pony toy line, which eventually evolved into what it is now. A whole bunch of different reiterations of the toys and the show. I don't think she ever could have foreseen that something she made could have evolved into something like this, beyond anything that even I could have comprehended, or any of you could have comprehended. I think she would be very proud of that. But I think she would also be ashamed with all of the arguing and fighting that occurred in a fandom for something that she helped make. And all of the great things that it's done, such as raising charity awareness and helping out people who have been depressed and sick and struggling with their lives. This cartoon has helped troubled people make it through another day. She didn't just give you a cartoon show. She gave you an opportunity. She gave you a chance to be a part of something bigger than yourself. And you squandered it. And another thing about these angry videos that I was putting out, I was starting to think of them as therapeutic. Because every single time I did one of them, I felt a huge amount of frustration getting out, and after that frustration got out, I wasn't feeling as stressful as I was before that video was put out. It wasn't just about making them, it was about making them public, making someone out there know that this was how I felt about something. There was just something about it that was easing my stress. And in another matter, I think people actually thinking about what I had to say was helping to relieve that stress. So, not only were these angry videos helping me in speaking out for the situation with this fandom, I actually think it was helping me. It was helping me feel less frustrated, less keeping it all bottled up inside, less hate-filled. Like, after I released that video about Mage, I didn't have so much against her anymore. In fact, that's kind of why I made that additional thoughts video on her. So, I guess maybe this was something that was necessary. Maybe by doing this, I would be speaking for other people who felt the same way as me on the situation, and I would be helping myself to not be so angry and hate-filled towards others. Because I don't want to be angry and hate-filled. I don't want to be constantly reminded of the bad stuff in this fandom because there is good in it. I don't want to feel like the bad is overshadowing the good. Because I want to speak for the good in this fandom. And I felt like something that had to be done was speaking against the bad. And it was actually helping me feel calmer and better. And with that in mind, I saw no reason to stop, regardless of how everybody else was seeing it. Nothing they were saying was influencing me. I was just doing what I wanted, and I kept on believing in what I was doing. So, what is this feeling? What is this sense of concern that I was starting to get? Why was I starting to believe that what I was doing was wrong?